nowadays you got to have that kind because people nowadays.
Before we get straight into the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Declan Kirby GAA Star. Declan Kirby GAA Star Championship Journey. It's a series of GAA team children's books written by primary school teacher and GAA coach Michael Egan. You can check it out in the link in the description down below, of course, as well. Follow the trials and tribulations of Declan Kirby and his team at Smithgreen Gaelic Football Club, recently formed but promising GAA team. The book is now available in Easons and all good bookshops, so check it out in the description down below, and let's get straight into it. Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I'm delighted to be joined here by 11-time All-Ireland winner with the Cork Ladies Footballers, Bríd Stack. Suppose first of all, Bríd, obviously we're running through the two games obviously happening this weekend in the Ladies Football Championship, the two semi-finals. How's things for yourself?
Good, flying it now. Enjoying watching the girls at the moment. Thankfully, Cork's still in there at the moment, so hopefully, this weekend goes well for them. I suppose I know there was the postponement of the lads' semi-final this weekend, and that was announced. So I suppose thankfully for the Cork girls, that they get the chance to play in Croke Park for their semi-final as well, which was I suppose brilliant, because they were probably themselves and Meath were probably at a disservice. Seeing as how Mayo and Dublin are playing before the men's game on Saturday. So, thankfully, I suppose, they're given that position and that opportunity. And, it's brilliant that all four teams get to experience Croke Park before the final.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, I suppose, with the game obviously being cancelled, and the fact that it's almost like a standalone event with the under-20 final as well that's happening. Yeah, I think in some ways it's probably worked out for the best.
Yeah, it has worked out, but look, I suppose there's still the big elephant in the room. Had the match not been postponed, Cork and Meath were still going to be going ahead in Tuam, which I felt, and probably a lot of people felt, was a bizarre location for Cork and Meath to play semi-finals. So plenty of things still to be addressed, but look, for now we can just take what's at hand, and thankfully, the girls, as I said, are getting their opportunity to play in Croke Park on Sunday.
Absolutely, yeah.
With a bit of a crowd as well, which would be great. And I know there's huge hype as well about the under-20s, and I think everyone is really intrigued by this Offaly team as well. So I think it'll make for a great day out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think any team that kind of comes along and maybe kind of upsets the kind
run of the mill,
exactly, like beating Dublin and then beating Cork. I mean, especially when you see how successful Dublin have been at senior level, and then obviously Cork at under 20 level down the years have been brilliant. So I think with Offaly coming along, I think it's probably I think it's a new team, and I think in Gaelic football, ladies football, camogie, hurling, I think that's what we all want to see, is new teams come around. And I'm sure we'll get on to Meath in a moment, but they're a team in particular that sort of come out of nowhere, really, obviously winning the intermediate championship last year.
Yeah, big time. And I suppose, look, you have to give massive credit to Meath. They took I think it was probably 2016, the end of 2016. I know that there was, a big undertaking by their county board and the players involved. They weren't happy. I suppose, look, it was, the senior team wasn't going places. It was undeniable that they were, probably at a loose end in terms of where they were in championship. I remember we played them in a qualifier in 2015, and I think we beat them by something like 40 points, which isn't good for anyone. It's not good for the game. And they asked to regrade at the end of 2016. And look, obviously that comes with massive opposition as well from older players that have probably been there a long time. So it was a very brave decision for Meath to do that. They, put huge, and all credit has to go to their county board as well. They put big emphasis on getting structures right, getting the right coaches in, getting GDOs into schools and communities, and getting Meath football back to where it should be. And look at them now, they're really reaping the rewards. They went through an intermediate, and obviously it took them a while to kind of get going in intermediate. They lost in All-Ireland. They came back and they won in All-Ireland. They are now, after coming up into senior rankings, and look at them already in their first year up senior. They even up division. So they were up Division 2. They were playing Division 2. They're after winning the Division 2 final, which means they're now playing Division 1 football next year. They're playing senior this year, and they're now contesting an All-Ireland semi-final. So, it's a real rags to riches story, but massive credit must be given to Meath, and I suppose putting the long plan in place, and they're really reaping the rewards, and all credit must go to them. It's a real I suppose motivation for what counties can do when they do things right.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and definitely, like, even from watching them in that game versus Armagh, like, definitely think a lot of people probably had Armagh coming in as favourites. Obviously, like, with Amy Mackin, probably one of the best footballers in the country. Like, and from watching that game, like, I was definitely very impressed with them. Like, the way they moved the ball, the way they got forward, and like getting forward, and even the likes of Vicky Wall, and at different stages as well, Emma Duggan. Like, they've definitely like looking like a very good team, and without doubt, I'm sure they'll give yourselves Cork a good run for the money at the weekend.
Yeah, big time. And like I was very, very impressed with them after the Armagh game. Like, I suppose I watched the Cork game, and probably had a couple of question marks about Cork after that Meath game. I wasn't expecting Meath to come out with, I suppose, the ferocity that they did. I wasn't expecting Cork to back off as much as they did, but like, all credit to Meath. They really, put it up to Cork the last time they met in the group stages, and like, definitely ask Cork a couple of questions. So I don't think we're in for an ambush at the weekend, because I think Cork will definitely have learned a lot from that game. But like, you have to be impressed with Meath and what they're bringing to the table. They have a real system in place. Everyone is playing to it. They're not afraid to go at teams. They're not afraid to run through the middle. They're extremely fit. They're extremely fast. They're brilliant at crowding defenses. So like, at the moment, they really are an informed team, and like, it's very, very hard to stop momentum like that. And they're after really developing great momentum in the last couple of games. So it'll be a cracking game. And I suppose of the two semi-finals, it's probably the one that I find a little bit harder to call, to be honest, because I suppose we saw what they brought to Cork in the group stages. Both teams have learned a lot about each other in the last couple of games. And as I said, Meath are coming in with huge momentum. Cork, I feel, have been very inconsistent in the last couple of games. I know they're carrying a couple of injuries as well. So I just be very wary, I suppose, as a Cork supporter coming into this semi-final. But as I said, it won't be an ambush, because, Cork are very, very prepared for, I suppose, the threat that Meath pose.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, definitely could cause a number of problems, I'd imagine, for Cork or right going into that game. And just looking at the Ladies Football Championship in general, like, what have you made of it so far this year? Like, obviously, it's definitely been fairly competitive, a lot of close games. Like, even, watching Dublin against Tyrone, I remember, I thought was a very competitive game. Like, definitely so far anyways, it's been a very competitive championship so far, and definitely been very entertaining.
Yeah, it has. And I suppose, like, when you look at the men's championship, and I suppose the fact that it's still gone back to the provincial setup, like the ladies, I suppose, structure definitely, ticks a lot of boxes in terms of competitiveness, and probably, like you say, getting good entertainment, and getting I suppose, giving teams opportunities as well to play teams from different provinces, obviously, and to get the ball rolling. But obviously, you're curtailed then with ladies football having junior, intermediate, and senior. So obviously, the group structure is going to be a little small. So, there's only 3 teams per group. There was 4 in one group, all right. But like, can you just imagine that in the men's, if there was, if you're looking at like 2 teams or 2 groups of 16, like the amount of matches that are there for the taking, amount of, super combats that we could have. Like, so I definitely think the ladies have done it right in terms of structure. And obviously, they're a bit curtailed in terms of the numbers that are up in senior. But what has been on display this year, I suppose, is definitely has been entertaining. And I suppose there's a couple of the groups, obviously, look, you could call who's going to come out of it, but there's been a good few ding dong, double hit, or I suppose second place battles, which have been great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and even what you were saying with the men's game, like, I definitely love for them to trial something like that, at least for a year anyways, and even run the provincial championships off as pre-season tournaments or something like that.
Yeah.
Because, like, even when you've looked at the format, it's definitely been very successful over the past couple of years.
Very successful. And I think even the ladies this year, now granted, look, it's COVID is probably a different setup. So I know this year had an extra match that, say, last year didn't have. So like last year was a straight semi-final, whereas this year they included a quarter final and kind of just extended it by that one game, which has been great because, it added a bit more drama to the championship. I know there is an option for a provincial championship after the All-Ireland series has been played, depending kind of, I suppose, on how counties are lining up or how their county boards are. I know a lot of clubs have been put on the long finger as well, so especially for the last 4, but there is that option to run the provincial championship afterwards. And I suppose, yeah, look, it doesn't have the same influence that it might have had in other years, but I definitely think the championship is all the better, for the way it's structured at the moment.
100%, yeah. And I suppose looking at the Dublin and Mayo game, first of all, I suppose what have been your thoughts on Dublin over this year and over the past couple of years? Obviously, won the last 4 All-Irelands in a row. And I suppose from watching Dublin myself down the years, they always seemed like that team that just couldn't quite get over the line. And then eventually they did. And then obviously yourselves went back to dominate for a long period of time. And now it seems like it's Dublin's time to dominate in the ladies scene. So what's been your thoughts on Dublin so far over this year and the past couple of years?
Yeah, I suppose, look, just going back to when I kind of finished up, we beat Dublin in 3 All-Ireland finals there towards the end, on 14, 15 and 16. And you couldn't but look at it from a Dublin point of view and how much, I suppose, hurt and experience and heart, I suppose, mental toughness that those kind of 3 finals must do for a team like it has done for Dublin. And a lot of those girls are, they're the absolute bread and butter of this Dublin team at the moment. So mental toughness is only learned kind of on the field like that. And, these girls have it in spades now. They don't panic. They back themselves to the hilt. Like the last day versus Donegal, they went down 1-2 within a matter of minutes. And, a lesser team might have panicked and started, forcing passes. And Dublin they just have that ability. They have that toughness now. And they have a lot more skill as well, I suppose, even looking at the way that they are now compared to maybe the team that they were when we were beating them. They're just very much more assured of their skill. And as I said, they're not afraid to pull the trigger when needed. And then obviously to not panic and play the ball around and hold on to possession. They're very comfortable on the ball, which is, I suppose, their key thing. Their skills are much more improved. And biggest thing, I suppose, is their physicality. They have improved massively physically. So I suppose the team, that we would have played in 2014, 15, 16, there was a lot of, I won't say big girls, but we'd find big backs in us anyway. There was a good shot of us that I suppose were taller, stronger girls. Whereas now, you look at the Dublin team and they are very, very physical. They're not afraid to, use their power against you. They have a good level of height as well. But it's that power, it's that level of intensity that they play with. It's really, really impressive. And they just seem to seamlessly be able to introduce players, the new players there that have come in this year. You think a player like Noelle Healy, Sinead Goldrick is out for them at the moment. They're able to transition players in like Hannah Tyrrell, Niamh Heatherton, who are big physical players, who are not afraid to get stuck in. And, it all happens very, very seamlessly for them. So they have that power, but then they have the injection of skill and pace like Caoimhe O'Connor and, Siobhan Killeen, Eve Kane, all these impact subs that make massive difference when they come in. So they're very, very impressive at the moment. And I suppose you couldn't really look past them at the weekend either versus Mayo.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose like what you were saying there, obviously conceding 1-2 in the start of the game, and obviously Ciara Trant made that big save as well, turning onto the bar, preventing it from being 2-2. So can you even see from winning 6 All-Irelands in a row yourself, can you even see that experience within the Dublin team? Because we've seen even with Meath against Armagh, maybe where Armagh panicked a little bit for 10 to 15 minutes, that you could see Dublin did have that experience really just to kind of work themselves back into the game and be patient in the game. Yeah,
and Mick Bohan obviously has them very well drilled. Again, like that, they play to a system and they don't panic. They keep, that system in place the whole time. And as well, Mick Bohan is very, very ruthless. He's not afraid to whip off players that have been there 5+ years. He's not afraid to do that. And I think everyone on the team knows that. So if you're not performing and if you're not ready to play with that intensity, you're going to get the curly finger. So he definitely seems to have a good balance between, obviously keeping players happy, keeping them on their toes. And you just have to look at Carla Rowe. I think Carla Rowe is probably the player that I feel has improved the most over the last couple of years. I remember Carla Rowe when we were playing 2014, 15, 16, I would have said she probably would have been like an important player to them then. But she would have been a lot slighter. She, not that she would have questioned herself more, but she definitely probably doesn't have the same belief that she does now. She is such an assured player. I think she scored something like 2-3 of Dublin's 2-12 the last day. Like, that's phenomenal for a single player. And she's doing this time and time again. And she is just developing in confidence. And she's a real confidence player. And she's a delight to watch at the moment anyway. She's definitely a massive playmaker for Dublin. Herself and Lindsay Davey, I think, are the real orchestrators for that team, and they do it at style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was 2-3 against Donegal, like you were saying before, and I think she scored 1-1 the previous game as well. Like, so it's definitely been a top class season so far for Carla Rowe. No two ways about it. Like, what ways could you see Dublin maybe hurting Mayo in this game? Like, I was having a look at Mayo against Galway, like, and I suppose they've improved as the season's gone on, but you would have to imagine that Dublin are certainly going into the game as favourites.
Yeah, I suppose, look, Mayo have come up against Cavan, Monaghan, and Armagh, I think was, in the group stages. And like, yeah, look, Rand, they suffered a nice old defeat to Armagh, but there was probably a good bit of shadow boxing going on there, seeing as how both teams had kind of progressed. But Mayo, to their credit, have definitely progressed as the year have gone on. They have grown into this championship. Like, you have to remember, Mayo as well have a bit of a new look team. They have a new management, and they're after getting, a lot of players back where there was maybe a lot of hurt and a lot of probably friendship fraught, over the last couple of years. So that won't be healed straight away, and it'll take a year or two to develop, as well as developing, I suppose, what type of game plan you want to play, and positional sense and that doesn't get sorted out in a very quick year. But look, very glad to see them. I suppose it probably took a Connacht derby for them to really spring to life, and we saw them, really take the game to Galway in the early stages. My one worry for Mayo was that they came up against a Galway side that were without two Leonards and Mairead Shoiga for most of that game. Sinead Burke obviously retired, so Galway really came back at them in the second half when those three impact subs were introduced. And I suppose, like, had the game gone on, you could have seen, Galway maybe pushing, but, they didn't find their way through, and all credit to Mayo. They held tough at the very end. And if Mayo are to kind of, I suppose, do any damage to Dublin, they really have to use what their advantage is, and their advantage is their speed. My one worry would be that, like, so take, for example, like the Mayo midfield versus the Dublin midfield. You're talking about Niamh Kelly and Sinead Carrickey coming up against Lauren McGee and Jennifer Dunn. Like, there's a massive difference there in physicality. And I just think, if that's going to be your launch pad, which it was for Mayo versus Galway, it's going to be a very, very different game. But look, you just have to play to your strengths. You have to play to your speed. You have to try to avoid the tackle against a team as physical as Dublin. And look, we'll see what Mayo can really bring to the table. But I suppose for me, I think there may be a couple of years maybe off where they need to be. And like I said, there's a lot of mending probably that had to be done in that first year. And hopefully, we'll see them progress from this year on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the midfield battle is definitely going to be interesting, like what you said, because Sinead Carrickey, like, scoring 1-2 and in that game against Galway, like, I thought she was very impressive. And I suppose if she was to bring that same...
Yeah, Sinead and Niamh together, they're very similar in that they have massive speed and very, very attacking. Like, Niamh would be a very natural forward as well. But I just think, if you're talking about where the game starts, where it's created, where you win your first initial battle, I suppose that would be my one concern for Mayo, is in the strength and power series of the game. But look, if you can avoid the tackle, if you can move the ball quickly, which Mayo are capable of, you never know what could happen.
Absolutely. Like, and even like looking how Dublin were, I suppose, a little bit sluggish out of traps against Donegal, and how fast Mayo started against Galway. Could you see even a situation maybe where Mayo maybe go, start with a lead kind of similar to Donegal and maybe manage the game from there? Or could you see Dublin maybe like kind of learning their lesson, I suppose, from that Donegal game or the opening 10 minutes?
Yeah, I would imagine that Dublin have learned a lot. I know Mick Bohan was speaking afterwards about how, the team were very sloppy and he wasn't very happy with how they went about the start of the game. So I can imagine that's something that he's definitely going to address. But in a field as big as Croke Park, pace is everything. And if you can move the ball fast enough and avoid tackles, like I was saying, like it can be a very, very open game for you if you create it. So like I said, look, it's there for Mayo. They have absolutely nothing to lose. They're going in as underdogs, so they'll relish the challenge as well. But I just think the experience and the power and the strength of Dublin might be too much to overcome on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so I suppose your prediction, you're going with a Dublin victory to see off the threat, obviously, in this game.
Yeah, I would have to tip Dublin. But I would expect Mayo, especially, look, you're led by veterans like Fiona McHale, who has been there, done that for many, many years. She's back into Mayo, and I know she relished playing with Mayo for many, many years. And I know a player like her, of her caliber and her kind of influence, they love the big day. And there's plenty of girls in that team that are very, very willing to, I suppose, step up to the plate. But I just think it's a bridge too far at the moment for them. And you'd have to tip Dublin.
Yeah, same as myself, I suppose. As a Dublin man, I'm hoping for the double anyways, and hopefully it'll be a sign of good things to come.
I know.
Moving on from that, anyways, I suppose the Meath and Cork game. Like, what have been your thoughts so far on Cork? Like, obviously came past Meath, like we were saying earlier. Then obviously Tipperary as well, and I suppose a controlled performance against Waterford. It wasn't brilliant, but I suppose it was enough to get the job done.
Yeah, and I do think, look, Cork, look, they haven't been setting the world alight this championship. I was very impressed with them, I suppose, during the league, and then obviously came up against Dublin in the league final. And just that power and pace, that assurance that Dublin had. I just think Cork were, while they started really well, I just think they never had the match to Dublin. And coming into the championship, I would have expected Cork to, I suppose, be really kind of setting down their mark, especially given the very quick turnaround after the league final. But they've kind of not fell over the line a couple of times, but I would have just expected a more complete performance, a more clinical performance by them, especially given the group. But then I suppose, look, there's a time for peaking, and Cork are due a big performance. They are due a mass performance, and I suppose the thing is, look, that they're not unfamiliar to Croke Park now. They're not unfamiliar to an All-Ireland semi-final. They're not meeting Dublin, which they did, I suppose, 2 years ago in an All-Ireland semi-final. So, I would love to say that, I would love to see them put on a real complete performance. I know that there's a couple of injury worries, which I suppose would worry me from a Cork perspective. I'm not sure that they have the depth that, say, a team like Dublin would have. But I do think that, their experience and I suppose what they have over the last couple of years, should see them over the line. But at the same time, you look at Meath, they really are a team that are playing with absolute abandon. But you have to look at who they have played as well. They played against Tipperary, and I suppose there was, Tipperary probably were a team that are really not playing to great form. They've suffered a good couple of injury blows this year. So there was a period in that game where Meath kind of fell apart a small little bit, so you'd have to kind of question a few little things like that. They came up against Armagh, who probably are really, really reliant on two players, in Caroline Hanlon and Amy Mackin, and one of those, Caroline Hanlon, wasn't playing for the game. So you'd have to I suppose try to weigh it up and balance it up. And while I was really, really impressed with Meath, you don't want to get too ahead of yourself either in terms of kind of who they're coming up against, because it is a big jump, and championship is a big step up now, and this is an All-Ireland semi-final. So you would like to think that Cork's experience, I suppose, at this level would see them through. But I wouldn't be surprised if Meath got over the line either on Saturday. So that's what I mean at the start, when it's a much, much harder one to call than the Dublin Mayo game.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Cork, like we said there, with the experience in the team, do you think they're even coming into this game maybe a little bit under the radar in some ways, I suppose, in terms of the big picture of the All-Ireland? Because they have, as you said, multiple All-Ireland winners in the team, and they have been to All-Ireland finals over the past couple of years. So they do seem to be coming into this under the radar, and certainly they do have a lot of experience that maybe Armagh didn't have in the Meath game, in the last game.
Yeah, that's it. I suppose, and it's all over the field. You've Ciara Sullivan, Roisin Phelan, Emer Scally, Melissa Duggan, Orla Finn, and it's kind of spread out along their team. They probably are maybe a little bit more balanced team than, say, Armagh or Tipperary would have been, and definitely pose a lot more of a threat. So I suppose the one thing you would like to see is Meath sticking to their system and playing to their strengths, because that has been wonderful. You would hate to see them retract back to, I suppose, allowing Cork advance on them. So I definitely think it's going to be a massively competitive game. As I said, like Cork do need a mass performance, and I think, you know, if what I'm hearing about a couple of injury worries, I would be a bit worried in terms of kind of their depth going into this All-Ireland semi-final, you know?
Yeah. And like, how do you think even Cork will stop Meath's forward runs and directness, like we were saying before, with the likes of Niamh O'Sullivan and Vicky Wall and Emma Duggan, and even the fact that Meath, they get their cornerbacks forward quite a lot as well, and their wing backs forward, like a very modern day football team in many ways, and that'll certainly be a big threat for Cork in this game.
Yeah, massively, and like they're physically stronger as well, and they're well able to carry ball. They're very comfortable on the ball, and like you say, I suppose they're very fit, very fast. They're well able to get back and flood their defence as well as break at pace. And you know, when you have ball carriers like Vicky Wall and, you know, Emma Troy coming up from cornerback, it's a very hard team to defend as well. And I kind of had said this as well before. I suppose Cork's last game. Versus, no, it wasn't versus, sorry, who was it against? No, it wasn't, sorry, it was against Watford. But basically, I suppose I had questioned Cork's ability, I suppose, to, you know, win their own battles. And kind of, I suppose, they were leading on a very high free count, kind of up to, actually, sorry, it was the league final versus Dublin. That was my one concern in the build up to the league final. Their free count was very high. And, you know, against a team like Dublin and Meath, in fairness, are very similar to Dublin in the way that they attack at you. You know, there has to be a lot more discipline on the ball. So hopefully Cork have learned that in the last couple of games. And because that's what Meath are going to do, I would imagine that they're going to stick to their game plan and run at Cork as hard as they can. I suppose, yeah, like, it'll just be very interesting. I suppose as well, the big thing is the refereeing. The refereeing is going to be a big issue. As well at the weekend. I suppose it was really heightened by Max Kern and Mick Bohan after the Donegal Dublin game. So I think refereeing is probably going to have a big impact as well on these two games, in terms of will they be left go, or will the amount of, I suppose the free count was massive in the Donegal Dublin game, and you know, there was a lot of frees but not a lot of action after it, you know. So like sin bins in ladies football can cause massive disturbance. And you know, imagine if Dublin get 2 sin bins or 3 sin bins, if Cork get a sin bin or 2, Meath got a sin bin in their last game, you know, so they can completely change the game as well. So that will dictate a lot as well if, I suppose, if there's consistency across the refereeing of both games as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, it's definitely one worth keeping an eye on, and especially Meath in that Armagh performance, like the way we played, like they were saying. And like the way they were running Armagh, I thought was extremely impressive. And I suppose for Armagh in general, like just touching on them, like did it surprise you a bit that they were beaten as comfortably as they were by Meath, considering they were coming in as, I suppose, heavy favourites in that game?
They were coming in as heavy favourites, I suppose, given their 2020 season. And I suppose in the 2020 season, they really came in as massive underdogs. No one was expecting the performances that they put out in the 2020 season. I suppose before that season, Armagh, to be honest, would have been seen as an average enough team. But 2020 was a season that Armagh really sparked to life. So I think a lot of people were expecting a lot more from Armagh this season, and given, you know, how they turned out huge performances last year. So up to that point, I suppose, in fairness, you would have tipped Armagh. They were going very well. Caroline Hanlon is an absolutely huge loss to them. She is a huge playmaker for that team and a huge leader, and has been for 10 plus years on that Armagh team. So, you know, to lose someone of her caliber obviously is going to have a knock, be it, you know, psychological or otherwise. It is going to be a knock for any team. So like Armagh, would I have liked to seen Armagh coming in against Cork? Probably would have for Cork's benefit, but like I think a Meath versus Cork game, whoever goes forward, and if it is Cork, I think the challenge of Meath definitely will bring Cork on if they are to go into an All-Ireland final. And likewise, you know, you'd love to see Meath roll the dice against, you know, Dublin if Dublin get over Mayo. So, you know, it'll make for a very intriguing All-Ireland final if, say, Dublin get through and say Meath come through on this side, you know. So yeah, like I suppose we know what Cork and Dublin pose to each other, whereas you know, and not taking from Mayo, like I just think maybe they're just maybe a year off it at the moment, a year or two off it. But like imagine the threat that Meath could pose to Dublin. But I suppose you can't test them until they're really tested versus a Cork team that's in real championship mode in semi-final mode this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and that's what I was going to say next. Like, obviously, the possibility of an all Leinster final, Dublin and Meath, big rivals. Like, especially with it being in Croke Park, I'd imagine it would be a huge occasion, and definitely, you know, it would definitely be a spectacle and one worth watching.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I suppose, you know, in the men's final and the hurling, all you want is, I suppose, new teams coming to the fore and new teams trying to stake their claim and leave their legacy on the sport. And I suppose Meath, in fairness to them, like you have to credit them on the massive amount of work that they have put in. And this is a long-term goal with Meath, and they're a very young team at the moment. So you can see this building for many, many years to come. But their momentum that they have come through with in the last 2 years has been phenomenal, and a massive credit to them. And like, imagine coming up from winning an intermediate All-Ireland, imagine getting to an All-Ireland final, like it's the stuff of dreams. And I suppose taking on, say, a team like Dublin potentially, who, you know, are at the peak of their powers. And like that, like you're going in as complete underdogs if that was to happen. And like you say, an all Leinster derby potentially, like, you know, so it'd be great for the game like that. I suppose I remember years before Dublin kind of came up to the fore, like I think we played, you know, 6 different teams in the build up to us, you know, I suppose getting to Dublin and playing Dublin 3 years in a row. We played 6 different teams, and I suppose what it does to those counties, it really boosts a county, you know, if you have the prospect of getting to an All-Ireland final and being in the mix and for contesting an All-Ireland final. So it would be great for the game, as I said, to have a new challenger. So, you know, it's very exciting, and I think that's what makes this weekend, and especially the Cork Meath game, very exciting.
100%, yeah. Like, and who are you backing then to win the game? Are you going to stick with your native Cork, or do you think maybe Meath might pull off the shock?
Yeah, sure. Look, I suppose, look, as a Cork person, you'd love to see Cork progress. So my one concern is, like, I don't know, do Cork have the ability, if they were to meet Dublin in an All-Ireland final, do they have the ability to get over the line? Whereas I suppose Meath are an unknown, and I'm really intrigued by them. And like I said, if Meath were to beat Cork at the weekend, it's not going to be an ambush, because, you know, everyone has been looking at Meath, impressed by Meath this year, and looking to see, you know, what they're actually made of when the chips are down. So this weekend is going to be massive for Meath in terms of their progression going forward in the next couple of years and what they can build on. So yeah, look, I suppose I would love to see Cork going forward, but, you know, I couldn't write off Meath, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was you know, a bit of a shock that way at the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll definitely be one worth keeping an eye on. Just on a side note from that, who would you kind of look at as maybe been the ladies footballer of the year so far? Who's kind of stood out or been in the top 3 or kind of caught your eye so far as a player that could potentially go on and be the ladies footballer of the year?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, you're looking at kind of the top 4 at the moment, and like Amy Mackin was absolutely unbelievable last year, and like her displays were absolutely top notch, and I suppose she carried that form into this year. And, you know, some of her abilities and her skill that she put on show, you know, were brilliant for young boys and girls to see and to look up to and try to emulate. But this year, I suppose you'd have to look at kind of the way that I suppose Carla Rowe, I think, is going about her duties. I think she's probably the most on-form player at the moment. So she would probably be my tip for it. But you know, as I said, I was very, very impressed with some of the Meath players as well. Like, I think Vicky Wall is a very, very important person. Emma Troy is a very important person to that Meath team. Like Emma Duggan has had a great game in the last game. But I think overall, I think the importance of Carla Rowe to that Dublin team, she you know, is kind of she's a bit of a heartbeat of that team, and she's selfless in her work rate. So she would probably be my tip for player of the year at the moment anyway.
100%, yeah, definitely. No, I couldn't disagree with that. I think they've all been fantastic so far, and Vicky Wall in particular, I thought has been very impressive. Obviously, intermediate footballer of the year last year, and coming up to senior level as well. Like, she's been a real leader, I suppose, in that Meath team this year. Yeah,
massively. And like, when the chips are down, like, even, you know, and I was talking about that kind of that purple patch, I suppose, that Tipperary had during the Meath game, who steps up, only Vicky Wall to score a goal. And like, she just seems to have that ability, time and time again to pop up when needed and take on this blistering run. And she just has that power, speed, strength to make something happen and create opportunities for Meath. So as I said, she's a really important player for them. And I suppose I'd be really interested to see how Cork deal with her, as well as, it's not just Vicky Wall. Like, they have a good couple of forwards to try to deal with there. Like you were talking about Niamh O'Sullivan, Emma Duggan, suppose Stacey Rhines is very on form as well for their free taking. So I suppose I'd love to see Roisin Phelan on her. I think that could be a savage matchup. I'd love to see how those two weigh up against each other, because they're two fierce competitors. So that could be one to watch for the weekend.
Perfect, Bríd. Well, look, listen, we'll wrap this up here anyways. I appreciate you coming on, and appreciate your time.
No bother. Thanks, Lauren.